Joining us on TheInformer is Chris James from Northlink, and for those of you that don't know, Northlink is a regional partnership of industry, education and government, which was established about 30 years ago.
It was.
Yeah. Now, the last time you and I spoke, we talked about some of the impact that COVID-19, the pandemic, was having on businesses and others who were trying to do business in the northeastern metropolitan region. What can we judge 1 or 2 months on since the last time we spoke? How is the idea that businesses, is it been agile enough to make the necessary adjustments to start things rolling again? Or are they still stuck on, and suspended as they were barely 3-4 months ago?
Well, we're in a phase that I'd liken to the morning after, where we're just waking up.
Okay.
And retailers are opening again with social distancing. Restaurants are opening.
Pubs still challenged though by the numbers game, aren't they?
They are, as are restaurants and cafes. But those that have survived are opening their doors.
Yep.
We've been talking to food manufacturers. They've said that they've had a better May than they've had April. So they're improving, but they're not back to pre-COVID levels in terms of turnover.
Chris, the thing that fascinates me is everyone says, why can't it open? It's not about some of these businesses opening. It's about whether they're viable to open. I mean, cinemas, for example, can't possibly run with a half a dozen people in the cinema. You need a number. Which makes it sustainable. The same thing applies to the hotels, which really want to see 500 or 600 people come in. And we're also hearing from the venues, the music venues. I spoke to Johnny Collins, former bass guitarist from Powderfinger in Queensland. He's running a music venue, and he says, we've got a venue here that can have 3,000 or 4,000 people. But in post-COVID, they're struggling because they're being told the government sees us as a problem and not as a business that they want to support. So real challenges. Are you seeing some of that impedance also happening in businesses in the north?
Yeah, the big problem is with big gatherings, and that could be weddings, it could be
major events.
Major events.
Yeah.
Yep. Big breakfasts, big dinners. Live music, for instance, concerts, the AFL, etc., etc. That's
well, we're hearing more and more that we're going to see 20,000, 10,000, 30,000 turn up to the G. That's a $100,000 facility. Sorry, that's a 100,000 people facility. I suppose the problem is to get them in and get them out, isn't it? And also to service their needs during the game. Bathrooms, bars, all going to come under enormous pressure, especially if they have to maintain the social distancing and the hygiene practices that we've been hearing that they must maintain. Are you getting that sense as well?
Yeah, and 10,000 is a very small crowd at the MCG.
Yes, but 10,000 people all heading to the bathroom is not a good move.
It's not, and all trying to get into the ground at once, that could be problematic in terms of...
So what sort of strategies might we see? Are we hearing staggering maybe, as we've heard in certain venues where we've gone in, that table by table you'll be able to go out and go to the smorgasbord? Might it be as simple as section by section you can use the loo, you'll have to wait for another half an hour before we can invite you to go to the bathroom next time? Is that the sort of discipline that we have to instill in order to get some of those big crowds moving again?
Look, I'm not sure if we'll ever see smorgasbords again, but...
Or for that matter, cocktail parties with canapes.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see, the big spreads. If you're going to see canapes served, it'll be individually.
That's right.
Packaged.
That's right.
Yes?
And a la carte will be back in terms of dining.
Very good point. Very good point.
Yeah.
That means real big challenges for some of the Asian restaurants in the north. The Yum Cha, how does the
Lazy Susan?
The Lazy Susan work?
Yeah, the Lazy Susan and the trolley might be problematic. I think having been to a couple of restaurants and cafes, they actually have fairly stringent rules now in terms of actually signing in, using hand sanitizer.
Yes, I saw that. I saw all the registration that goes on. I still notice though, and we've seen it at a coffee shop recently, someone walked in to sit down and he was called back and asked to register, and he told them to go forth and multiply and left. So we are still seeing some people choosing to feel offended, and you know, they don't want to go down that pathway. They expect things to return to normal. I think normal's gone, hasn't it?
Oh, it has for the foreseeable future, and unless governments feel they've got the virus under control, you're not going to see it go back to where it was pre-COVID. It'll be different in some way or another. But I sense governments are gingerly opening up the economy step by step and seeing what happens.
Does it frustrate you enormously to see Victoria taking such a cautious, conservative approach to opening up, whereas some of the other states, and New South Wales one of them, really being much more bold, still understanding the disciplines, but much more bold at opening up areas that Victoria's still quite some way from arriving?
Look, I think there are two sides to the coin, and everyone's impatient to open up again in the business community, and that's understandable. But I suspect Victorian government is saying to itself, well, look, we want to do this properly, and if we have an outbreak, which means we have to go back to harsher restrictions, that's something we don't want. So I can understand both points of view with that particular issue. What's
the sentiment of business in the north? What's Northlink hearing?
Look, overall, it probably depends sector by sector, and even in certain sectors like food manufacturing, it depends who they're selling to. The view, I think, is in the overwhelming majority of cases we've survived. In many cases, they're grateful for things like JobKeeper, and they'd like to probably have some certainty around whether that'll continue or not. It seems to be a week-by-week proposition at the moment.
Are they still tallying numbers? I mean, we saw that the original figure for JobKeeper was 130 billion. Then we realised, or they realised, that the numbers were out of whack. It was more like 70 billion that the federal government would have to come up with. If they had originally budgeted for 130 billion, is it possible that maybe now that it's 70, they could extend it by another month or two? And that's what we're hearing people saying, if only they can give us a bit more time to get back on our feet. Are you hearing that sentiment?
I am hearing concern about if JobKeeper is just lifted in September regardless of what's happening.
Going on. Yeah.
I did hear the Prime Minister on the radio on the way here saying that he would study the situation carefully and unpack the data and try and work from there. So he was reassuring.
So what's your reading of that observation or that utterance?
My reading is that they're actually going to look at the economic situation before they make a decision, if I was to make an interpretation of that.
Well, look, since the last time we spoke, there was so much we didn't know. We know a little bit more now.
Yeah.
If there's one message that we can leave this particular interview with, what would you say to business right now? You've done okay, and keep on that tack, and we'll get over the hump, or is there something else you want to say?
I'd say two things. I'd say overall well done on surviving, and in many cases...
compliance,
You're doing the compliance, but also being very adaptable.
Yep.
We've seen a lot of businesses change their model overnight. I'd also say, look, keep talking to your local members of parliament to let them know the real conditions, and talk to your industry association as well, so we can talk to the powers that be and influence their decisions.
Chris James joining us from Northlink. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.